No one has a crystal ball, right? It is fun to try and guess. There's two main ways to sort of break up what we're going to see next. Is you got your price-based capitulation, but then you have time-based capitulation. So what I'm talking about there is, if we think about Bitcoin from top to bottom, every market cycle that we've seen so far, it's going down less and less, right? But the real kicker, and this is what usually catches people, and we see it in our own sort of data in our own user base when everyone goes a bit quiet, is that time-based capitulation. You know, if you're ever looking for a reason why that 4-year cycle could break, it would be something like crypto, all of a sudden becoming boring. It's not topical. It's in everyone's portfolios. It's being bought in the background constantly. And that could be something that changes everything.
What's your opinion, I should ask, about whether the 4-year cycle is dead or not? How did you come to be at Swyftx? Because you're the lead market analyst, I believe.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. So I don't think it's a trajectory I'd probably get again, or many, to be honest. It's just one of those things where I used to be a pharmacist. So I was managing about 2 or 3 stores just around Brisbane and remote Brisbane areas as well. And just trying to crack through, right? Like anyone in their 20s, just trying to work out, well, how do I get to like the next level of, being financially successful and all that sort of stuff. And I'd always just been passionate about investing. So, learning about technical analysis, fundamentals, investing in stocks back in the day. And it was in 2016 I first heard about Bitcoin and crypto. Thought it was a scam. Didn't buy any until end of 2017, I think it was. And then the whole market crashed. So I basically bought the top back in that cycle. And then since then, I was just obsessed with it. Got into a whole bunch of social Discord groups and Telegrams and all that sort of stuff. Facebook groups was big back then, specifically in Australia. And essentially met the founder of Swyftx in one of the Facebook groups. And he was putting up just an advertisement. They were looking for someone to work in an exchange in Brisbane. And I was just curious. I was just like, oh, I didn't know there was exchanges even in Australia, like apart from the major ones back then. So I did like what we're doing right now, just started talking to the founder back then. And one thing led to another. I was basically able to just land a job at a startup, which was Swyftx back then. So I was working my regular job and also working at Swyftx at the same time. I did that for, I'm going to say 3 to 4 months until, I was comfortable with the business was comfortable with me, and then I was able to come on full time and really haven't looked back since. So being a startup, really got to kind of do a lot of everything. But my role at that point was to basically create the like our VIP account team function and work with customer support team, as well as do a lot of stuff with marketing over the years. So providing, like as you might know, like with the podcast as well, the Tapping Into Crypto podcast, which we've had running since 2021. That went gangbusters during that bull market. We ended up in like Apple top 10 for business podcast for just in our like first couple of months. And it was definitely a case of we timed it quite right with the market, and everyone was interested and wanted to know more about crypto back then. And just since then, I've just sort of moved around within the business to where I've landed now as the lead analyst here. So still doing a lot of that, media stuff as well, engagements with Cointelegraph and any other news agency as well. Done a few appearances with Sky News. But then also lending everything I've learnt from the business side of things and from the market side of things as well into helping drive strategy at the top level of the business as well. So, it's been an interesting ride, but it's definitely just a case of I've learned a lot over, I guess, my working life, and I've just learned ways to apply it to different things. And that's kind of how I got to where I am.
Wow, what a ride!
Yeah, it has been.
And Swyftx is now Australia's largest Australian crypto exchange, isn't it?
I think we're nipping at the heels of CoinSpot, but I think now with the recent acquisitions, we might be number one. Yeah.
And what's going on in Swyftx aside from the recent buyouts? Where are you guys aiming to be? I know I've spoken with Gabby. Your security, I use Swyftx. Security is like no other I know.
I guess where we see things going is it is going to be the next big step is, I guess you could call it the just the reinforcing of the industry as a whole. Like we're going to get that legislation come in through one way or another. It may not look like what we think it's going to look like today, but the end result, it's coming. So for us, it's just about understanding proactively, and as you would have mentioned, you talked to Gabby as well. Like we're being very proactive and on the front foot of like, what does that environment look like? What does it take to be, a leading operator in that space? And there's a lot of things that we're doing specifically in that space of security, in that space of fraud detection. That you start to like talk around in the industry. It's basically leading the pack. And as Gabby, she gets flown around globally to talk all about how they're doing, how she's particularly running things and the team. It's a really, really fascinating intersection of what's possible thanks to blockchain technology and how we're applying it. And, banks are asking questions and things like that. So, we see that as a key part of it all. And then also, like you mentioned earlier, and I mentioned earlier, the acquisition side of things. So, what does growth look like for us into other markets as well, which, we're still working out what that strategy looks like. But, we do see that, we're quite happy with how things are going in Australia. Once we see what regulation looks like, we'll be able to like then expand things like product suites. But, it's not about waiting for that moment. It's also understanding, okay, well, what does the opportunity look like globally, for us to do what we do best, which is, again, just putting that customer first, trying to make it as safe as possible. The user experience in terms of having, key account managers and things like that. It's not something every exchange offers, and it might not be for everyone, but we feel like there is a segment of the market that wants to see that. Outside of just Australia, so yeah, we'll continue to see what that looks like for us. But yeah, I feel like the regulation side of things is the more wait and see, which is quite painful for anyone that's sort of had to sort of like go through that process. I know we're not the only industry to go through this reform process, but it's just about, again, from a leadership perspective here, having that, sort of corporate strategy that, we're going to try and do our best to see where things are going. But, we realize we might have to pivot at some point, depending on how things play out, right? So new opportunities might open up. Certain demographics may not look as, locations may not look as appealing as they once did, just because of the way the cards land. But, I think if I had to point it to one thing, everyone's talking about it, it's the Clarity Act in the US. So I think the tone and response that comes off the back of how that gets laid out, and also in the situation that it gets rejected. So you have to kind of keep an open mind of like, what if they do just kick it down the can for another 4 years? What does that look like for us as a business? That's what we're just basically just trying to make sure we're set up best for right now.
Is the uptake of crypto in Australia, and I guess I could use the gauge of Swyftx, I guess, is the uptake of Australians buying into crypto as an investment still on the rise?
It's probably not on the same trajectory as what it was if we looked at, say, data from when we did consumers sentiment sort of data, 2023 and 2022. Like, I think we did see like a stronger demand for it, but I think we just have to sometimes stop and step away from the situation a little bit and look at the facts. And the facts are right now that a lot of Aussie households have got a lot more on their minds than, am I going to buy Bitcoin? We're seeing consumer, like even just looking at just, ABS data, and even if you go outside of Australia, other countries have the same issue. There's this huge amount of people's income right now that's just already squared away to financing debt or paying back debt. Sorry. So your debt to income ratios, they've been rising steadily since 2021. Just consumer sentiment is probably what I'd sort of talk about as being the best proxy, and I've wrote about it quite a bit recently and in a lot of reports. But if we look back at even previous bear markets, zoom out past even the lens of crypto and look back at equity cycles as well, the sentiment right now it is quite low, and that is, again, people feel that everything's against them when they're, obviously struggling with employment rates going down lower or higher, I should say. There's a higher rate of unemployment, even new job creation, it's slowing down. The latest report from, again, Australia showed that we did see lower than expected job growth last month. It's continuing to be a pretty sticky trend. So I think for the average consumer, as hard as things look right now, it seems like, let's even look at what's happening geopolitically right now. Like the Straits closed again after it's being open and then closed and then closed and then open. It's a rock and a hard place, right? Because this is going to have a flow-on effect for everyone. And the problem is the longer that those sort of tensions are occurring at a higher level, the rest of the world is going to see just increased input costs over, the longer run. So I think at the end of the day, if I had to sum it up, it is just about the world needs to potentially feel a little bit more confident just on just their day-to-day living before we probably see a huge massive resurgence of people going back to crypto. But that doesn't mean we see adoption stop. I still think, these trends, or these sort of declines in sentiment that we do see, it's a multi-month sort of trend. It's never usually multi-year. Like that's, we're not talking like a multi-year recession coming or anything like that. But when people are sort of deciding if they're going to invest in crypto as an asset, like I wouldn't be surprised if right now, again, looking at the data, it's not on front of mind for everyone. And I think that's pretty interesting. But yeah, I still think it'd be interesting to see how everyone thinks about crypto once that regulation is here. So if we do or don't get it, like again, how does that impact people's perception of, am I going to invest in cryptocurrency as well? How does that shift? I feel like anyone who's in it now, for them, it's just like, yep, the story hasn't changed.
Yep.
I'm buying Bitcoin because I'm short fiat because I think the system's just inflationary long term. So I'm just going to keep buying what I've always done and put a percentage into Bitcoin. And then you've got people that are always on the fence. They want more, a little bit more of a confidence before putting that first foot forward. It might just take another couple of years for them to make that decision. So it's a really interesting, period of time I think that we're in right now.
I think even more fascinating for me as I see the institutions get on board.
Yep.
And the ETF inflows. There, last week, the data I saw was the inflows were still positive.
Yeah, they were. I think we've seen the outflows even really slow down materially. I think there was, if we're talking about just the speed at which money was leaving the US spot ETFs, it was peaking back in October, November. And since then, it's slowed down. But like you said, it has been consistently on the out. But yeah, I think we just saw 2 or 3 consecutive weeks of green, which again, it'd be interesting to see how the market responds this week. Again, I think we just moved up to as high as 75K over the last few days. So if the market still thinks that's a good price, given nothing's really changed with the headline risks that are out there currently still. But yeah, it's been interesting to see that change in character.
Yeah, and if we focus on Bitcoin for a minute, because I find it fascinating that through all of the turmoil and volatility globally, Bitcoin's pretty much held its own.
Yeah, it's this interesting concept. We were talking about this actually the other day in the office. It's everyone have a debate about it or an idea, but I guess the way I sort of frame it is everything comes down to liquidity, and Bitcoin is the canary in the coal mine. So whenever something's up, if you want to call it like that, the first one to sniff it out generally is risk assets like Bitcoin. So as soon as there's less money available, like we did see a bit of tension. Now looking back at the data back at Q4 2025, Bitcoin was the first asset to really start to move lower. And also the same is true as well when we came out of that, call it an inflation crisis in 2022. As soon as they started softening a lot of the policy at the time, we saw some of the faucets open up, some of the spigots put money back into the economies. Bitcoin was also the first asset that moved higher as well. So it is a very interesting one to watch as almost like a proxy for everything else. So yeah, it's definitely interesting.
Well, fingers crossed. I think we had a weekly close above 74.
Yeah,
which is pretty significant. I think it just hit, didn't it?
Yeah, it might have. I haven't checked it, if I'll be honest, since I've got on this morning, just catching up on messages. But yeah, let's have a quick look. Yeah, 70, just about 74 now. So closed around high 73s US.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah. It will be an interesting week because, as you said, I think just because not much has changed, but price has gone up a fair bit higher. So we'll have to see if something happens. Or yeah.
How do you see? And I think it's moved beyond a narrative now; it's real. Around the world, if we put aside the first world countries, if you look at people in third world countries and people who are fleeing their own country or leaving a country where the monetary policy doesn't allow them to take their currency, what we've seen is an adoption of Bitcoin because of its ability to be transferable, and it's not banked. So if I'm in, let's say I'm in Iran and I'm leaving, and I've got any form of currency, I can't do anything with it. But if I throw my money into Bitcoin, move anywhere around the world, I've still got my Bitcoin.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, one of the cool, I guess, key characteristics of it. Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think it'll keep doing that until someone says you can't do that. Like, it will be interesting to see if, like, a lot of those countries, if they change their stance or positioning towards crypto assets because they don't essentially want heaps and heaps of people net sellers of their own currency to buying a foreign asset. I can't tell, sorry, if there has been any period of that in the past that we could sort of draw adjacent to, but yeah, I mean, you nailed it, right? Like, there's a lot of countries you could hear about in the headlines only in the last few years that people are holding up their banks at gunpoint because they can't get their money out of the bank because the government basically isn't sort of giving the depositors, the collateral they need to give it to clients that have their money in their bank. So, yeah, it's an interesting thought experiment. I think, for those people that are, impacted by it or have their friends or family impacted by it, and, someone at least knows how to access Bitcoin or other crypto assets like stable coins is, I guess, your other one as well. It's not hard to imagine. Everyone's got a smartphone these days. It's pretty easy to get access to a mobile reception, to get the internet. Everyone's got the tools to, really utilize this new sort of digital finance layer. And yeah, I mean, I could definitely see the appeal, especially if you're, sort of fleeing a country or, you're in a bit of strife in that way, why it might be an appealing way to house your wealth, I guess.
Oh, I'm curious about it also because I saw some stats the other day that said there are 50% of the population in Africa and roughly 25% of the population in India, so significant numbers, who don't have a bank account. However, they do have a mobile phone, and the stats say their adoption of crypto assets, USDT principally to start with, is going like this. It's massive.
Yeah, I guess where there's smoke, there's fire, right? Like, there's definitely a lot of people that have, maybe seen it as a way to grow their wealth that they normally wouldn't have access to, in their own countries, or protect their wealth, right? Like, even if everyone sort of agrees, gold's a great store of value, which, if you look upon it in the last 2 years, it's been great. The next 2 years could be different. We don't know. But even for the average person to get access to an instrument to buy gold, it's not that easy. You still have to open up a brokerage account or, buy it physically and store it yourself and hope that no one robs you. Like, there's quite a bit going on there, right? So, it's just, I guess opens up a whole nother door for people just to, it seems to be that they're having no issues getting accessibility. So if that doesn't change and those trends are moving up, like you said, it only seems like they're likely to keep going unless something changes. Let's say at like a government level where they start cracking down on it potentially.
What are you guys thinking in terms of the value of Bitcoin over the remainder of the year?
Look, dollars, like, no one has a crystal ball, right? It is fun to try and guess. But the way that I guess I like to frame it, and this is, again, speaking from experience as well as what's in the data, but we find like there's two main things to understanding. Like, if we all agree that we're in a bear market, which all data sort of points towards that we are in a classic bear market sort of structure right now, there's two main ways to sort of break up what we're going to see next. Is you got your price-based capitulation, but then you have time-based capitulation. So what I'm talking about there is, if we think about Bitcoin from top to bottom, every market cycle that we've seen so far, it's going down less and less, right? But if we still subscribe to the idea that it's going to go down at least 80%, well, that kind of tells us there might be some more pay to go. Could we end up at 50, 45, 40, 49, 52, 53K? Like, we don't know, right? But we know that there is, historically speaking, a good chance that we've still got a bit more downside to go. But the real kicker, and this is what usually catches people, and we see it in our own sort of data in our own user base when everyone goes a bit quiet, is that time-based capitulation. So while you could put in that bottom, let's say within the next 6 months, give or take some time, you could still see the market be very lethargic to actually come back to life again. And that's usually when people give up, even though prices already bottomed out and maybe Bitcoin's trading back at 60, 70, 80K again. A lot of people may be like, look, I've been in this for too long. It's too painful. Yeah. I'm just going to sell, right? That's kind of a phenomenon that we usually see. And if you look at any Bitcoin chart, it's that period where it's just plateauing, it's just going sideways. And it can do that for quite a bit of time. And when we just again go back to what's happening on the macro stage, that's kind of I guess what we could be seeing. A lot of what's happening now, it's creating a lot of volatility, it's creating a lot of like changes globally and the reordering of things, however that wants to be sort of labeled up and mocked up. But then once that all settles, again, this is what we talk about, there's got that time-based capitulation of when everyone might be interested in crypto or Bitcoin again. So that could still be quite a bit of time left on the cards or the horizon, right? So yeah, I think in a nutshell, we still would expect it to go lower, but like we've all seen with crypto as well, everything doesn't happen in a straight line. Like our base case was, or my base case, I should say, the last 2-3 months has been, that local bottom we saw at 60 was probably going to then go up before it could go down. So, we are looking at where price is moving right now, watching very avidly as to if the buyers step in and keep prices going higher, could go as high as 80, 85K. But again, if we just don't see that marginal buyer return, these are the kind of levels where we're at right now, where we could start to see the sellers come on. But I think a lot is going to lean on just sentiment. And that's been the hardest thing, I think, for the last 2025 and 2026 so far, is like the whole markets are more driven by sentiment than they are any form of data right now. So I think it's all very much going to be what's happening in the headlines is probably what gives people the confidence to go higher or lower at the moment, which is, it's very tough to read.
How are you seeing, or what's your opinion, I should ask, about whether the 4-year cycle is dead or not?
Good question. We've debated this quite a bit and spoke about it on the podcast as well. The fact is the 4-year cycle has held up every single time. So like my personal take is it will continue until it doesn't. I'd rather wait for it not to hold the 4-year cycle and then predict that it's not going to hold up again. And there's a lot of reasons why people point to the 4-year cycle is going to remain intact. They call it like debt refinancing cycles, inflation cycles, all this jazz. But there is just an element of, if the market expects something's going to happen, it invariably often just happens. It's more of a human psychology piece more than it is any, everyone wants a really good reason as to why does Bitcoin move in 4-year waves. And while we can point to like a few reasons why that might explain what it does, sometimes it's just a simple idea of, if people believe that, we're at a relative discount on a 4-year basis and we're at a relative premium on a 4-year basis, those same people that bought low, knowing the 4-year cycle, are going to sell high, knowing the 4-year cycle too, right? So it's almost like this, it's something that kind of manifests itself. But yeah, I'm personally, again, like I mentioned, I would probably say I'm more of a, saying the market agrees that the 4-year cycle still remains. And I think if you did follow just the 4-year cycle regime, you would have sold in October or September last year. So yeah, those guys are not looking too sad right now. So yeah, that kind of then points us to October to January is like that window as well. So if we talk about 4-year cycles, we talked about when do we think a bottom's going to be, what price could it be? That's kind of like the base case potentially heading into the back end of this year. But again, we don't know if we're going to hit that bottom sooner or later. Do we get that long extended draw out period at the back end of this year or next? Like, that's a bit no one really knows. And that's where trying to understand the macro can be a bit helpful.
Yeah, the psychology is interesting. So I think the psychology, obviously, it's a key driver of behavior.
Yes.
But I wonder how much the institutional inflows could possibly affect the outcome. Because those guys they're investors and they're looking for a return. So, I imagine they're going to be tracking this carefully. They've got their own algorithms around it. And they're going to be wanting to buy as low as they possibly can.
Well, it's interesting, because there's a few ways to look at this. And one of the angles is they're playing the long game. For them, 4 years is just like a hair on, this whole, investment opportunity and revenue opportunity that they've got in front of them. And that's kind of like the base case of again, if anything's going to break the 4-year cycle, it is something along the lines of the market structure behind Bitcoin changing. So what I mean by that is, it's very simple. Market goes up because there's more people buying than willing to sell, and the market goes down because there's more people wanting to sell than willing to buy. That's it. That's all that moves price. especially with an asset like Bitcoin, where it's actually fixed supply. You know how much is coming onto the market every day. It's a very, very clear way to structure the demand of it all. And if you do get these institutions come on board, let's say like let's start with like retirement funds like 401ks or even like SMS sort of super funds in Australia. If all of a sudden everyone starts putting 1% of their capital even into Bitcoin and they accumulate that, like everyone gets their super added to like every paycheck, right? If 1% of everyone's paycheck is now going into Bitcoin, well, all of a sudden like the picture looks a lot different, right? Especially in an asset where I remember when the ETFs were really firing last year, they were buying I think 6 times the amount of Bitcoin that was actually being produced every 10 minutes, right? Like every block size, they were buying 6 times the block size. So that's a pretty good reason to want to buy something, knowing that the market can't even produce it fast enough compared to what people are buying it, right? Like the picture looks a lot different. And that could be why we saw the market so different. Just the most recent cycle, like we saw all-time highs a lot sooner. We saw a huge positive wave of sentiment heading into the ETF launch, which then resulted in a bit of a pullback. It's usually what you'd expect into major news catalysts. And then even Donald Trump getting elected, as much as we don't want to talk about him, but just the sentiment that they were going to bring more clarity and regulation to the crypto space, again, like it just drove that same amount of people all of a sudden changing their behavior, speculating that this would be an asset class that would be a part of that government's strategic objectives, right? So it goes on and on and on like that. And I think, if you're ever looking for a reason why that 4-year cycle could break, it would be something like crypto all of a sudden becoming boring. It's not topical. It's in everyone's portfolios. It's being bought in the background constantly. And that could be something that changes everything, because everyone looks at a stock chart of, let's say, the S&P 500 or the NASDAQ, and it just looks like this. Well, it's that phenomenon I just explained, right? Like every super fund, every pension fund, everyone is just constantly providing a bid to these products, and it's constantly being walked up, right? So the reason to sell an index like that, if you're a super fund holding trillions and trillion dollars of assets, it's not really appealing. Like, you're not going to try and sell your S&P 500 in the billions or trillions and then look to buy a dip. Like, it's just not going to happen. You're going to wait until people get paid over the next couple of months and just keep buying and keep going. So it's pretty interesting. And that's what I do wonder what the future looks like for the industry from that perspective, when all of a sudden it's boring and it's not topical and everyone's just a marginal buyer. I do wonder if the 4-year cycle does end because of something like that.
I won't even speculate on that. Let's just see what happens. I think I still stick to my thesis that long-term Bitcoin's a good asset to own. It's a scarcity asset.
Yep.
And the adoption still seems to be there, and there are multiple use cases that seem to be emerging. So I can't see myself diverging from my own thesis that long-term, regardless of what happens today.
Yep. You're not scared off by the quantum narrative and things like that?
I think if you take anything in isolation, it's easy to instill fear and say, well, quantum's going to affect Bitcoin. Well, dude, quantum's going to affect everything.
That's right.
Not as if there aren't a bunch of people right now thinking about what are we going to do when this happens and starting to set up the protocols now. Because Bitcoin's not the only thing that would get hit. They're going to take out the banks.
Yep.
In fact, the banks are probably easier targets than Bitcoin.
Yeah. A lot of those banking protocols, I think some of them are like the Swift network, like the global network. It's infrastructure still from the 80s. So, yeah.
So, I go, is quantum a risk? And do we know how far off it is? No, not really. I would put on the table, there's a closer risk than quantum anyway. So if you look at Mythos, which hasn't been publicly released, I don't know the spec on it, but from what I've heard, it's got incredible power. And it could cause more disruption today without even thinking about quantum. Quantum is not even a thing yet.
No, it's not. It's still speculation in itself.
Yeah. So, no, I'm not scared about quantum. I think we'll put in a lot of protocols across the spectrum.
Yep.
And we'll get it wrong, because we always do. And will we possibly get a hack? Yeah, probably. and we'll deal with it like we deal with everything. But I don't think it's the end of the world.
Yeah. No, it's pretty much feel the same.
Yeah. Now that I've said that, somebody's going to hold me to account for my opinion.
That's right.
Yeah. I think the next couple of years are looking pretty good.
Yeah. Like the next 10 years, or do you reckon next 5 years? Or
No, I reckon the next 3 to 5.
3 to 5, yep.
And my thinking around that is based around AI. It's based around adoption, the need for infrastructure. Even more than the infrastructure, the materials to build the infrastructure. We've got shortages.
Yeah. Huge shortages. Yeah.
So, I could do a brain dump about this for a couple of hours. We won't get into it. But for a whole bunch of reasons, and those being the primaries, I think we're in the middle of a massive, massive shift. And it's almost like frogs in boiling water. You're in there and it's not boiling yet. You it kind of feels a bit warmer. We're getting there, but you don't know it's happening.
Yeah, true. Good way to put it.
But I'm excited about it. I think our future in the next 5 to 10 years is going to be something we've never dreamed of. I think we'll be privileged to be living in it. Some bad stuff will happen for sure, and we'll deal with it. But generally, I think everybody's life's going to get better.
Yeah.
And again, I talk about Bitcoin. I like the alts, and I do play with them a bit. But for me, Bitcoin's a good, stable, long-term investment. And I think it has a really strong place in the new world. And I'm not sure. I don't know what that really looks like, to be honest.
Yep. Yeah, I agree. There's a lot of people that say, so it's for payment. I'm like, not really. But if you want it to be, it can be. It's almost like its identity is evolving as society is evolving, right?
Yeah, I think so. Good. Any ideas or any thoughts or in your imagination of where that could land?
Bitcoin specifically?
Yeah.
I mean, you've got to think of it. I just go back to like primary principles. So like, what does Bitcoin do fundamentally? And for me, the way I think about it is it takes energy and converts that into stored value. So I see it the same way I see things like oil, the same way you see other commodities. And I think it's really interesting and quite fulfilling to see that in the US specifically, it's been deemed a commodity. So like that kind of like, for me, it's like, well, the shoe fits. Because for me, I just think of like Bitcoin, the price might change the same way the price of oil changes. But at the end of the day, what it should provide society is the ability to be productive. So it's about taking time and energy, converting that into something that is, essentially digitized. It's a unit of value. And then that can be sold at a market rate whenever the person that produced it feels like they want to do that, and convert it into productivity, whatever that could look like in the future. Because that's what we see now, right? Like you see all this money go into CapEx, and then like you talked about before, there's all these rollouts happening and there's just not enough materials to build these things, right? So, you could say maybe right now we've missed the boat, but, building maybe a year ago in a lot of these spaces, if you had an asset or collateral of value that you convert into the next big thing for a productivity unlock, like I kind of see it as a tool to just use in that sort of way. I do think as we get into more regulated space, it'll be one of those assets that could be used as collateral for lending. So again, what the marginal cost is for you to create it. You know what the market wants to pay for it. You may just want to basically borrow a fraction against it to go and then do something with it because you feel like you can be more productive than the interest rate you pay on it. So, and I kind of put that back into that sort of same bucket as, let's say, like I guess gold specifically there, or property, or like some other form of collateral that's the banks will basically take at some sort of fraction. That's kind of where I see its sort of role having in the space of things. Stable coins, I feel like that's probably the more product market fit that everyone can understand day to day. If we move into this more agentic world where AI is just everyone's got an assistant, I can't see them using any other form of technology other than stablecoins, even if you abstract all the technicals away from the everyday person. But then all of a sudden, even traditional banks are just providing, infrastructure for agents to just, jump, basically on board and use stable coins. Like, I kind of feel like that's probably what we'd see as a major theme in the shorter term. But yeah, it'd be interesting to see. Well, that's my thoughts on, the whole Bitcoin thing. I definitely do agree that with what you mentioned with altcoins, like you have to be very highly selective now. I feel like the market has evolved, it's matured. Meme coins will always be a thing. I don't think that's going away. But when you're talking about big money coming in and investing in like large protocols, they need to see probably similar things that they're used to seeing in the equity world, which is revenue, fundamentals, onboarding, security, custody, reducing risk, being actually, a team that has a face, has experience. Like, I feel like that's going to be more of a non-negotiable now. And Hyperliquid's done a really good job of showing when a product actually has a product market fit, and you generate revenue and you put the revenue back into the project and you buy back the tokens, like, it actually drives price higher because they themselves were buying the token.
Yep.
And that's what we see, I guess, with equities too, right? You see, the likes of Google and Meta over the last 3 years doing buybacks. They've stopped now because they're about to do all these CapEx rollouts. But, that's what's propped up the market fundamentally for quite a while. So I think for crypto to catch up, it needs to be a little bit more salient in that way. It needs to make a lot more sense to the everyday investor before they jump into something. But yeah, I still think the meme coin will be there. Tokenized culture, I don't think that's going
People
away.
love it, don't they?
But it definitely won't have the staying power. Like, it'll be very much like what's hot right now, and everyone will just do the same thing they've always done. Oh, I'll throw $100 in a silly cat meme. Like, it's always going to be what it's going to be. But yeah, you want the big money to come in and like massive projects to be able to last bear markets. It has to be a lot more, just mature.
What's happening in the world of Ethereum?
Look, nothing more than I can say we've seen in recent times. What have we seen? Like, there's questions being thrown around, like the infrastructure of it all, like with the layer 2s. I don't think that's been sorted. I haven't kept super abreast of every update in that space. To date, I still believe everyone's that's looking to build in the blockchain space will still look at track record, actual security of the underlying protocols. And to this date, I'm sure there might be smaller chains that may be technically more secure on paper, but in terms of like total value locked and transactions completed and, active daily addresses, Ethereum's still the winner. And you can only imagine things like, the other elements of like transaction costs and things like that just become more streamlined over time. But, there's a reason why the RWA space or the real world asset space that we're seeing, the likes of BlackRock come in for securitize, and even like the New York Stock Exchange starting to look into that space as well. It's all built on an Ethereum backbone, right? So everyone is going to, I guess for now, stick to what they know works and try and adopt it to, how could they make it work with how they do business today?
It's the great evolution, isn't it? I think we're still in our infancy.
Yeah, it would seem so. Once you see like it's not a question of how would we adopt it, it is being adopted. That's I still feel like we're a little bit away from that. But yeah, I mean, there's obviously a lot of criticism ETH has copped over the many years. Even moving from proof of work to proof of stake, like there's still a lot of people that are quite disgruntled by that move. Look, I don't have a major opinion, I think, on Ethereum or any asset, but it does seem to be, the infrastructure or venue of choice when people are looking to actually build, longer term projects on. And, I think that's pretty important just to know now. But I would still say we don't know if in 10 or 20 years time, if we talk about like big banks adopting crypto, there's a good chance they just go and build their own infrastructure. Like they might take Ethereum, clone it, but make it more of a private ledger than a public ledger, if that makes any sense. And then they've got more purview or, the ability to walk back transactions and keep people off their network and things like that. Private networks can still be hacked. Like I don't quite know what's going to be the end result, but just because something works today, like let's say like Ethereum, doesn't mean it's going to be there in the long term still. Like we still don't know what that's going to look like. So it'd be really interesting to watch to see what happens.
So your top picks, what are you looking at? Not as a recommendation because we don't do those. But just out of curiosity, what's catching your eye? What are you keeping an eye on at the moment?
Just crypto?
Yeah, just crypto.
Okay, if it's just crypto, it's honestly just Bitcoin. And then I think with the crypto space, it is probably taking more of an equity lens, but just understanding how is a traditional world trying to interface with the crypto space, and who could potentially win from that race. So even like some of those stocks out there, like you've got Robinhood, you've got Coinbase, you've got even even some of these like old Bitcoin mining companies that are transforming into sort of AI compute companies. Like I think that's pretty interesting, just what's happening there. But in terms of crypto assets, like it's hard for me to really have any good long-term or even short-term sort of view on anything other than Bitcoin. I think when the time comes and we're through, again, that time capitulation element of this bear market, we will have seen, I believe, like the next front runners sort of show their face. So whether that's still hyperliquid or not, I don't know. Like there's still a good chance that, hyperliquid or something like that just needs one thing to go wrong and then the market doesn't trust them, right? So I still feel like we're pretty early, and the bear market usually brings out things that people are never expecting, like the whole FTX crash, right? Not to say that's going to happen again, but I'm sure something will happen that not everyone was expecting between now and a year and a half from now. So I think it'll be a good opportunity towards the back end of this year, start of next year, to start looking at that altcoin space and seeing how it's evolved or what's come out that's new that kind of makes a bit more of a fundamental sense, and that sort of thing. Even meme coins, like I don't discredit meme coins at all, but I still think right now what could be driving culture now is not going to be driving culture in a year from now because it just moves so quickly. So, just because it looked good on a chart with all crypto assets in the last 2 years or, the last 6 years doesn't mean it's going to do what it did in the past again. Like there's just no guarantee.
Yep.
The only asset that's proven that time and time again is Bitcoin. Because even if you look at Ethereum, which is, again, you'd say the second most confident asset out there, it still didn't really make major all-time highs in this most recent cycle. So, I guess the more time I spend in this space, more boring I probably get in my selections. But the one thing I'd say about myself is, but I'm very much trying my best to be across everything and sort of understand what does opportunity look like at any given time. So, I do think that RWA space is really cool, but I still think there's not strong fundamentals behind the tokens, and I still think the market's going to want to see that. They don't want to be donating to the next massive token unlock that gives all the seed founders, the infinite money hack. So I think everyone's in the same boat. They're trying to work out what's going to be, the altcoins out there that are going to make a difference and be the ones that the People's Choice Award, I guess you could say, for this next cycle. But I still think we're too early in the innings for picking something yet.
Fantastic. Hey, Pav, thanks for your time. As beautiful and short, but very informative. It's always great to hear what you're thinking and what you're seeing because you're in the middle of it.
Yeah, no, happy to. Thanks very much, Hanif. It was great to chat.
Yeah.
Nice way to start the Monday. Got to ease into a Monday. It's great. Yeah.